Let's give it a try. Does it work today or not?
Fingers crossed.
Yes, finger crossed. Okay, thank you all. And this is our 46th PC Open discussion. As we already have some technical difficulties with the internet, we'll try to record as much as we can from today and discuss about things, what's in plan today. So majorly we'll be talking about some questions that we have today already, and then I'll go through a little bit new concept around snapshot debugging, and that request is from Abhinav, who pinged me during this week and said that's a good topic that he want to understand. Sorry. So let's go through the normals. Where you register, if you are here for the first time and don't know this, then you can register here every week on this page. If you are here and don't want to register every week, then drop your name and email on the chat and I'll make you default attendee. So let's quickly jump towards questions and then we'll come back to snapshot debugging. So the first question is from Dasrath, and Dasrath is here. I guess I saw him. Now I don't see him. Oh, he's here.
Yes, yes.
Hey Dasrath, do you want to explain your question or scenario that you have?
Yes. I created a workflow from template base, and my condition is I have a sequence number like this 1 1 1 2 3. So when someone sequence number 1, then approve record for all number 1, but currently only one sequence number approved and other number is not approved. So I want.
Got it. Right. So yeah, so just for others' explanation, what I'll do is I'll see where my business center is. So here it is, and let's quickly set this up. And Dasrath, correct me if I'm wrong anywhere. So what I'll do quickly is first go into my user setup and set up all my users. And I normally have some approvers when I'm doing workflow. Okay, so these are my 5 users that I have in the system.
Yes.
And now what Dasrath wants is workflow user group. So we created a user group to use it in approvals, and the user group is something like test group, and it have approver 1, approver 2, approver 3, approver 4, and these two are of 1, and this is 2, and this is 3, just to take this example.
Yes.
And maybe I'm missing 1 because you had a 4-ish scenario.
Yes.
Okay, so now let's go ahead into workflows and let's set up a new workflow from template.
Sales order.
Okay, let's do a sales order if you want that. Sales order approval workflow. I'll generate the template. The workflow pattern you want to follow, which is workflow user group, and then we choose the test group. Till now I'm okay.
Your voice is back.
Okay. This will join me not the speaker. Is it clear now?
Yes, yes. Is it clear?
And you guys can see my screen, right?
Yes.
Yes. It's definitely clear, and we can see the screen. Yes.
Okay. So at this point, when the stuff is enabling this, and I might be from a different user, I'll just sign it out, and let's sign in with my normal user. So at this point, when the approval is enabled in the sales document, if I go ahead and create a sales order, should be there. Let's say let's create a new one, or let's use an existing one and save some time. So at this point, if he is requesting approval for it, it happens from here. The approval request is sent, and if he comes here and sees on the approvals, he sees something like this, which is, let's sort it by sequence number. The first entry and the second entry, which is still open, is for approver 1 and 2, and then the next two are for 3 and 4, which is as we defined in our approval user group. But now let's try to log in as approver 1, and let's try to approve the entry. So there should be a fact box down here. I'm hoping there used to be one earlier. Yeah, request to approve. So as approver 1, I come here and I'm approving this. So now what I'm thinking, Dasrath, and correct me if I'm wrong, what you are expecting at this point is if I come back here on the approvals, instead of 1, sequence number 1, you are expecting 1 and 2 to be approved.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Now, I understand that this is how kind of Microsoft projected it, that you can flexibly use it, but then there is a trick that you can apply, and I don't know how much you'll kind of appreciate that trick, but this is what I have found for all these years whenever I have used workflow, is it all works based on the pending approvals left. Now, as I have 2 approvers on approval level 1, okay,
Yes.
then I can actually change this condition to be if pending approval left are greater than 1.
Okay.
Not 0, but 1.
Okay.
Okay. So in this case, when I click OK and enable this and go back to my sales order, and in this one, if I do a request approval and send approval request, the approval cycle will be created as it is, which is when you go here, you will see sequence number 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 1, 2, 3,
Okay.
approver 1 and 2. But if I switch my profile as approver here and I refresh this page, I'll be able to see that I have an approval entry. If I go ahead and approve this and come back here and go to approvals, the one says open, but actually the other one is also open. So now it actually skipped this one. It will still say open, but this one is actually skipped. As an approver 2 can still go and approve it, but it doesn't stop the sequence. So let me show you the earlier one, which is this one. In this one, oh, it also enabled the 3. So yeah, it's, I guess, working by default in that manner. So the way it works, Dasrath, is an entry can be created, open, approved, or rejected, right?
Yes.
Anything that is open, that means those entry can be approved by the approver at that time.
Okay.
Okay. Anything which is approved, which is already approved. So at this point, either approver 2 or approver 3 can approve, but changing or getting approved by approver 2 will not initiate the 4th one. But if it is get approved by 3rd one, it automatically opens the 4th one.
Yes.
So system understand the sequence numbers. So when initially the entry was created, these two were, sorry, The approver 1 and approver 2 were open, and these two were created. And let me just do another one so that you see that. This one. Okay, so if I send it for approval now, and let's see the approval status, you'll notice that the first two are open.
Yes.
That means these can be approved.
Yes.
Okay, when any of these approve, this entry will automatically become open.
Yes.
Okay, so that means at that point approver 3 can approve, and when approver 3 will actually approve, then and only then you will get the approver 4 entry open.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
So don't look at number of entries that are created. Look at the status of that particular entry.
Okay.
So in this case, right now, 3 and 4 will see nothing on their request to approve. The request to approve for them is empty. But
Yes.
in a scenario like this, the first one is approved. The second and the third one both can see the entry, but the fourth one still cannot.
Yes.
Okay. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Give it a try. Otherwise, let us know. We can surely. And I don't want to kind of promote things that I have created, but there is a pretty deep series on workflow which is available on my YouTube channel.
Yes.
So if you go through, there are all the different scenarios, different type of approval options that are available, are already recorded there.
Yes. Yes. I know.
And they are all available on Business Center.
Okay.
So have a look. Otherwise, let us know. We'll surely talk about it.
Yes. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Sahid, I see your hand raised. Any questions before we begin? Or move ahead?
Yeah, regarding the approval, actually, I have a small query. If you allow, I like to.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Actually, my requirement is that in the approval screen, I like to add a column like who approve. I mean, who will approve? Because there are several people. I mean, in the hierarchy. So I like to add a new column in the purchase header. The name of the employee who will approve, and I like to move forward all this name to approval entry and request to approve page. But I'm not finding the I found the code in purchase header, but not finding the code for populating the data in approval entry.
So, and this is what? Business Central 14. So, as in, I understand what you're saying, and I maybe can give you some directions on it. Let me see if I find my 14. Yeah. So what happens is when you trigger your approval, let's understand the flow. So when you say request for approval, what happens is based on your approval setup, whatever you have defined on your workflow, that this kind of approval setup I would like to follow, right? That setup is respected. So based on this screen, or especially this option, the approval tweaks the way you have written it, right? Like in this scenario, we are using workflow user group. So it picked all the users in this user group. And then based on the sequence that they had, it kind of created those entries, right? If you use, let's say if you use approver, then there are different options, which is, do you want to follow a approver chain? Do you want to do it for a direct approver? If there is a hierarchy, as in, if there is a matrix that you have defined in your approval user setup, and you only want to create an entry for the person who have the rights to approve that much amount, then that doesn't follow the chain. That directly creates one entry for that person who have the authority to approve that much amount. Okay, first qualified approver means the same thing. And in case of direct approver, I guess this does something different. I'll have to rethink about direct approver. Oh yeah, so in direct approver, whosoever is assigned as approver on the user ID who is creating the document, that gets only the email. It doesn't follow the chain. In first qualified approver, it follows the same cycle, but it doesn't create email request or approval request for everybody. It creates it for the person who have rights to approve that much amount. So in this case, the dollar value or the amount value of that document comes into picture. And then when you choose a specific approver, then you can define that individual person here, right? And then there is a third category of salesperson purchaser. In this case, the all option remains same, but it includes the salesperson code of the document while finding the right approver for that document. So these are the default options. Now,
So I have a bit different actually. I'm asking different things.
yeah, so I'm going there. So
Yeah,
I guess
okay.
if I understand it correctly, your request is that in my purchase document, the user will select who will approve this, and that person should get the entry request more or less for approval. Is that correct?
Yes, yes. That's correct. But I'm using the group here. I mean, approval limit type using group, and in group there are, I mean, in one level there is 2 person, and in 2 level there is 1 person. So it's going. The request is going to, I mean, 3 person. So it's not possible to understand. I mean, because for all 3 approval, they are getting. I mean, they are showing the data, but I like to give the name, like who will approve it, right?
Okay.
Like
Okay.
in purchase header, I will add a column like the employee name, and then it will move in the approval flow.
Okay. I cannot go into details of it, but let me give you some direction on it. So what happens is whenever your workflow gets triggered and everything, at the end of the day, there will be a approval request entry created or something like that, right?
Right.
So that happens somewhere, if I'm not wrong, here, that a approval request entry gets created. Approval entry.
That's the code I needed actually. I need to modify that one.
On before approval entry insert. So yeah, this is the function which gets triggered from different places in the system, not just one place. And that's very important to understand. So based on your approval user setup, as it is done on your workflow. And as I'm saying this, keep this in mind that you need to be very sure about what you are writing. But this function creates the request entry. All the entries that we saw a while ago for different approvers, that eventually gets created from here. And approval entry always start from the same person who is requesting that entry, and then there will be a code that if the approver ID and the sender ID are same, yes, then change the status automatically to be approved. Otherwise,
Yes.
it's created and all, right? But if you check where this function is used, this function is used in so many places. So you get an idea that you'll have to do something here, but do it wisely because it's used drastically in every function. You need to be very sure what you're writing before you customize this so that you don't mess up the requirement or the process. Do test it on a Docker or a test environment before you actually deploy this. Because as easy as it sounds, the whole workflow runs on a kind of a more or less on a matrix setup that based on this different options that are available on your screen, what kind of code will be executed. It is not hard coded. The workflow runs on, and if I can show you, there is a workflow matrix if I can find it. And that matrix matrix is again generated at the company initialization time. So it's not something that you should ever modify. But for events, there is a different hierarchy, and then there is a huge matrix about events and responses.
Yes.
Right? And this all is defined when you create a new company or when you upgrade the system, whatever you do. And this all is written from the code. So there are so many situations based on which the workflow changes, and it is not everything is not code. So I'm just, I'm not trying to say no to your requirement, but what I'm saying is whenever you're doing it, keep all this in mind, that you have to think from that perspective, that what all I can break if I write something here. And maybe you don't break anything for the purchase or sales for which you are writing it. You might break it for other documents. So while you're testing this scenario, test other areas of workflow also to make sure that others are not impacted. Other business processes are not impacted. Does that make sense?
Yes. Sure. Thanks. Will do.
Okay. Sounds good, man. Okay, moving ahead on these questions. Where is my slide deck? Here it is. Balaji, and Balaji is here, I see. Yeah. So Balaji had a question: for a salesperson purchaser page, when I try to customize field, there is no field in the selection page. When I activate the design mode, all fields in the table are visible. Why during personalize I don't see any field? Okay. So the way Balaji personalize and design modes are different. Let me open my VS Code so that I can explain you that. So if I
just for moving, personalize is just for adding and dropping fields, but design just to move things that are already placed on the page.
Right, that's what it is. Well, let me show Balaji what we mean by that. So Balaji, when you get into personalized mode, okay, you will only see fields which are added in the design. That's it. These 4 or 5 fields.
Okay.
So from the nav word, understand it like this, that you only see whatever is added in the page by the developer or by Microsoft, which might have been set to visible false. Right? In this case, all these fields are by default visible true. So they are all added in your page, and that's why you see that page empty in the personalized mode. Because personalize is equivalent to when you do customize this page in nav rolled in a client. But as Sam was saying, when you get into the design mode, that is kind of equivalent to creating an extension, more or less, just to from the perspective of adding field, because it pulls out all the fields which are available in the table. And that's why the result of a design mode is always a extension.
Okay.
So it creates a page extension in the design, but personalization is equivalent to customize this page in rolled in a client.
Okay. And if by default the field visibility is set to false for a field, and if we need to add that field, so you mean to say that the field can be added only through design mode, not the personalization mode, right?
You can only add fields from the personalization mode if that field is in the design of that page.
Okay.
If it is not in the design, then you cannot add that.
Okay.
Does that sound correct or okay?
Yes.
Yeah, but I would prefer, instead of going to the design mode, you actually reach out to developer and get that done. Because it's very hard to do design changes and then maintain them going forward, because then the partner who is helping you, or as a partner when you are helping your customers, the design mode extension also consumes object ID. And if your customer goes into design mode and start adding thousands of design mode extension, then the developer will always, his extension will always kind of start failing when he tries to publish them, because that object ID is used, page ID specifically. And
Okay.
David, you have something to say?
Unmute. Yeah, I just if for end users that are looking at adding fields in, Eric Hogarten's Simple Object Designer. Have you tried that?
Yeah,
It's
right. I
really
forgot
good.
that.
I mean, it's
Yeah,
dirt
you
cheap.
don't need-
I mean, it costs, it's $200. It's the equivalent cost of maybe the cost of adding 2 fields on a page. It's so cheap, and you can just do it yourself.
You don't need the license for that
Right,
as well.
and that makes sense. Yeah.
I mean, if you compare what you're going to pay a developer to do it, you only have
Right.
to. It's paid for in
Well-
2 hours of 1 hour of consulting with a Navision developer. It's paid for,
And I guess we are thinking, as David was saying, we are thinking as a developer about the cost. Think it as a customer. When a customer, and these requirements as customers are moving to Business Central, adding fields into pages is a very common requirement.
Exactly.
And nobody
it
can-
doesn't require a license for that. It doesn't require a license. You just go
But
to,
it still requires
personalize, you add the
skill to
fields.
do it. Yeah, but I have seen, and that's a very good thing that David brought up, that I have seen, and I majorly work on upgrades. I have seen customers during test phase adding 200 design time extension. And that's a
Oh.
problem with the design mode, because it doesn't keep on adding page extension into the same extension. Every time they get into design mode, there is a new extension.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly. Yeah.
And what happened with that is they requested some change. We made those changes, and the extension was not getting published because that object ID or the page extension ID was used by the design mode. And I cannot control that what object IDs the design mode will consider, because it always picks the first available ID.
Yes,
And it's
Saurabh, you are
very
very right.
hard.
You are very right. Yes, I mean, you should not actually.
I would
Yeah,
like,
so
I would like to add one thing here.
Yes.
Also here,
Yes,
Saurabh.
Saurabh, I
You
also
are saying
say
right.
the same thing.
I have also faced some issue like when customer having a lot of designer extensions when he try to add some fits, and
Right.
sometimes it becomes difficult. Like what is the extension? Which is the extension which makes this field as a non-editable? So
Right.
that's very I mean tricky thing to find out which is that extension which makes this field a non-editable. How do we
Right.
find that? Is there any way?
No, not right now. But that's where that $200 cost that David was saying makes complete sense as a customer, and it's good for partners also. When they are doing changes which are in a better way, it makes our life also easier.
Yeah.
So that Simple
Also-
Object Designer, if you haven't seen the Eric Hogwarts video, I guess that's what David was referring. Go and watch it. It's there on his channel.
The other thing that's good about it is you can give it to a customer. So for instance, I with one customer, I put it in their sandbox, and if they want a field, they go in, they use this tool, they add fields in where they want them. And then I just export the app because the Eric's tool exports as an app, and then I can look at the
Right.
app, have a look at it, I can clean it up and put it in, which means that they're paying me just for maintaining and setting it up and not for the cost of adding fields. Because, I mean, whoever Sam is saying that $200 is expensive. I mean, if you think that $200 is expensive for a field to add into BC, I don't think BC is the product for you, because $200 is going to be just the cost of coffee. You get it. $200 is nothing. It's virtually giving away for free. And I think anyone that thinks it's expensive, you're going to be really, really shocked in a year's time when you see how expensive it's costing you.
Yeah.
It's just that, personalizing fields, we don't really charge customers for that. If it's a deeper customization, we do charge them for that. But if it's adding, removing fields, say in an inventory page setup, then we don't really charge for that. That's cheap.
But
Is
I
that-
guess it,
Are you talking about Navision or BC? You're talking on-prem or SaaS?
No, on-prem, of course.
Yeah, well, it's a totally different world. Yeah, I would never charge a customer to add fields in on-prem. Never. It's free. It's part of the business. But that's,
Exactly.
there's just you absolutely cannot even come close to comparing development
With
on-prem to
SaaS.
SaaS. It's a completely different world. Totally and
Right,
utterly
I
different
know.
world. Because that app's going to be up. Yeah, you can't be giving away for free in the, yes, you can on-prem, sure. But if you think you can do that on BC, then you're living on the wrong planet. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and I also think that it varies from different geographies where $200 is small or big, right? It also depends on how much customer is ready to pay. But even as a partner or as a developer, we need to start thinking from that perspective that in the long run, how much that will cost them. You know, if we think $200 is way higher as of today, think about how much is that not using that extension will add up the cost for the future. Because initially when BC was announced, I said, okay, let them do design mode extension, and in the end, we will merge all those before the go live. But it was a nightmare decision.
Yeah.
It was a very bad decision because they have 5-page extension on the same page, which is impossible to merge manually, and it takes so much time. But
well, maybe they should just make it an easier way. I'm sorry. I mean, if you just create an extension that you would add fields in, it shouldn't be asking you to add an extension for each time you assign, I mean, you create a field or you decide to make a field visible. It should be able to group them together.
Right, and that, I guess that's a good idea, which I wanted to post it to idea website, but I kind of keep on forgetting about it. But that's my idea, more or less, that if the design mode can use this one extension for all the design level changes, that'll be the better solution if Microsoft can achieve this.
Yeah.
But what I'm recommending to my customers right now is not to use design mode. That's very clear. But if you have to make changes on your pages, then use the profile mode. Because in that case, if you make multiple changes from the profiles, then it automatically merges them into one. It always, you know, and then you can also export those profiles and import them, like in Sandbox you do it, and then you can import them into production. So it's so much clear, neater, and it's easier for customers and also for us to do changes from the profile mode rather than doing it there. But it depends, you know, how your customer is used to that environment. Do they use profiles or not? There are different kind of customers. But yeah, if you haven't looked at that Eric's video, go ahead and watch it. And Balaji, yeah, you want to say something?
Yeah, I was testing in BC 18 version. Yeah, as you said, when I try to add the fields to design mode, it tries to create an extension. That name, it prompts to add the name for it. But when I don't add the name, I just delete that box, a dialog box. Then I think no extension is created, but the fields are added. I mean, so it does
no, it automatically takes a name which is something called design or default publisher, something like that. Have a look.
Okay. Yeah,
go
sure,
to the extension management window, and now in Business Central 18 there is a separate tag for those kind of extension called design mode. I guess when you go to your setup an extension, there is a new field which is now in the front, which is published as. So you'll see what is published as directly from the development from the VS Code.
Under dev.
Yeah, what is global, and then there is one more. Or my way is to filter out where the publisher is not Microsoft. It makes it more simpler and cleaner to see what all are pertinent and ISV extensions that they have.
They don't have Microsoft, or they have global or dev. If it's in-house.
Yeah, no, I'm saying just publisher. If I just filter out, I can see what ISVs they are using, how many design time extension, how many pertinent extensions they have.
Yeah.
So anytime I come to this screen, this is a saved view that I always will have. And save as on Microsoft extensions. I can always come here and see did they added more extension into it or not. Okay. So Balaji, does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Very good on this one, but that's good. Okay, this is again from you. There is a page called XML Schemas, and this is which version, Balaji?
This is in 18 also. It is there. It was also there in 15 version also. So actually, actually we are trying to develop an interface, and then we have to write a code in it. Actually, we are getting that XML file or JSON file from the interface, and then we are trying to parse that file and read the data from the file and try to store it in a table, nav table. So I was thinking whether standard Microsoft this XML schemas, I found this page, and then the Microsoft document
So again,
also says the same. Like it can identify
so
nodes.
if it is a JSON file, I would not recommend you to use any of the standard XML schemas and all, because JSON reading is all capable with the code directly. You don't have to kind of rely on existing. I haven't seen it. I might see this page going forward and tell you more about it. But
Okay.
we did one of the sessions, I don't remember, maybe a month or 2 months ago. You can go back in history and see on YouTube about the JSON import and export. So it can actually read a JSON file from AL code and write it into a table if you want. So there's a whole 1-day BC open discussion session specific to JSON. One is around JSON import and one is around JSON exports. And then Eric also have 2 videos around JSON. So you can watch either of those. That's not, or both of those. That's not a problem. But yeah, I haven't seen it or I haven't used it. But if you want, I can have a look on this and tell you what this is used for. But it's more easier if it is AL, then it's more easier to read it directly from the AL code using the JSON object. So there is all JSON objects which are available in Business Central.
Okay. XML files also will, I mean, there are some standard functions which
so
will
there
also
is an
be
XML buffer table, and that was also available in NAV. Okay, so you can actually read the data into the XML buffer like we do for Excel buffer. So now there are 3 major buffers available, if I'm not wrong. One is XML buffer, one is CSV buffer, and one is Excel buffer. Yeah. So let me see if I find that. But I think I have seen all these buffer and used them in past. But XML buffer is also exist in Business Central 14. I have seen that for sure. Application. So okay, let's make it simple. XML buffer. Yes. So there is a table which kind of stores, and you'll find an implementation with the developer that how you can write data into this. But this is a buffer table like we use for Excel. So in the same way, there is an XML buffer which is used to read and write data to XML. And then if you haven't used this, there is also something called as CSV buffer. It can read and write data from the CSV files. Okay. I'll surely look into this. I haven't used XML schemas page, but I'll look into it. If I find something, I'll let you know next week.
Sure. Thank you.
Okay, moving ahead, we have a question from Sahid. AL code debugging detail step. So Sahid, is it related to normal debugging or some specific debugging?
Normal debugging. I mean, code debugging.
So let's talk about snapshot debugging, and then if that doesn't clarify your doubts, you can, we can surely talk about it later. Okay, because snapshot debugging is kind of derived from a normal debugging console. Okay, so let's talk about it. So what is a snapshot debugging and why we needed snapshot debugging? So it is a specifically, as in the major use of snapshot debugging is majorly on SaaS production environment. So there was no capability of debugging a SaaS production environment. If you didn't know about it, you can't debug a production environment in SaaS. And there are so many reasons around it, right? You might put a breakpoint at one place and you keep on debugging, but at the same time, it kind of blocks those sessions. A typical example that I've seen in past, that people keep the debugger on and leave their desk. It stops the operation on your breakpoint where you have put it. So it was never the best practice to keep debugging on your production environment. But then this was one of the most voted idea that the community wanted to have a way to debug directly into production. And that's where the snapshot debugging came into picture. As the name suggests, the snapshot debugging will take a snapshot of the process that you're trying while you're debugging it, and then will download some files into your local VS Code so that you can debug offline. So it is more or less debugging, but in an offline mode. So what it does, you start snapshot debugging and you execute your code in the process in your production environment, and then it downloads that code into your VS Code, which you can like act as a set of repo steps of that particular problem. Then you can debug offline or rerun it if you need to kind of fetch the data again. It contains all the call stack as you see in normal debugger in NAB or Business Central. It also gives you the variable values at that particular instance when that process was kind of snapshotted, as in when that picture was taken for that. But the snapshot debugging does not stop as a breakpoint, which is a normal behavior of a debugger. I'll stop at the breakpoint, give you the control. It records everything and then you can rerun it on your local machine. You can capture a snapshot for a specific user if you know the username. If you are on SaaS, then you can also trigger it per session, or by default you can say just next session as you see it into the debugger console, which is debug next, debug current session, or debug user when you see that user window in a dynamic snap environment. So all those capabilities are there. There are some terms which are very important when we talk about snapshot debugging, which are these. The snapshot session, which is a call stack within that time frame when you start and stop your snapshot debugging. The other common phrase is snap point. It is equivalent to a deep breakpoint that we put in our source code. So if you put that breakpoint before running your snapshot debugging, it will capture the snaps at that particular instance on that breakpoint, but it will not stop the execution of the code. Then to achieve this, because we are talking about doing it from Visual Studio Code, there is a special configuration that you have to attach to your VS Code environment so that it can take snapshot. There are some rules about snapshot sessions, which is, are you doing it for a user? Are you doing it for a session ID? Or, just for the next session? And then only two things. One is snapshot initialize when you initiate your snapshot. And then at the end, you get a snapshot file in your VS Code. There are two common shortcuts for snapshotting. One is start. You start your snapshot session using F7, and then you stop your snapshot session using Alt F7. So let's quickly see a demo around it. What I've done is I have created a sample app. I was thinking about it. I didn't get much. So I just added one simple subscriber on my release sales document, which validates that my salesperson have email ID or not. And if not, it generates an error message. Not an actual requirement. It's just an idea so that we can test the process that we have. So let's publish this into our tenant, into our Docker environment. And then we'll see what's possible with that. So Sahib, from the simple one, okay, there is an error. Let's see what happened. Okay, 60,000 is utilized. should have used something else. Okay. Some weird number sometime. So let me take one. Okay. So in normal mode, Shahid, you actually, when you click F5 from a development environment, you get into this debug mode, and your pointer changes to the run and debug window here. Okay. So let's stop this. Okay. And just for assumption, assume that this is my production SaaS environment. So I deployed this, user tested it on the sandboxes. They said, yeah, that all looks good. Let's go ahead and deploy this. So what they'll do is they'll come to their sales orders, find a sales order, and let me cancel request. Okay. And then I'll just see that there is a salesperson, and just to see that I'll get an error message, I'll just see image edit. Okay. I have the sales order with salesperson code, which does not have an email address. And for a user, he'll go and he'll say, okay, I just want to release this sales order and let's see what happens. Okay. It's taking pretty good amount of time to release this. Did I stop debugger? Yes, I did. So the idea is at this point, the user should get an error message. So we deployed it, user tested it, everything works fine, and it is in the production. Now, after a week, somebody said that there is a problem in one of our mod, and the developer who worked on it is not available at that point. Now, you as the other developer want to understand what is the problem and how to fix it. So the inputs that you take from your customer are a little bit different from being a nav or even an on-prem partner, especially for SaaS. So the first thing that you should ask your customer is when they say that we get an error message is always train your customer to create a ticket with you by searching for something called as latest error. And it is also available on-prem. If you want to do that, that's good. But let's go to my sales order. Okay, let me take this one. Let's have JO and let me try to release this. Okay, so there is an error message. And this is just not related to this, to snapshot debugging, but in general, you should start telling your customers to use the latest error window and send you the latest error while creating a ticket with us. The latest error records the call stack and provides info that a developer can surely use to understand what's happening. So what happened is the call stack comes from this area, like on page 42, somebody clicked something, it went to this code unit, something happened, and then it went to a subscriber where something failed, which is okay, which is we wanted to do. But now what user did is instead of posting, he was trying to do a preview posting. So when he was trying to do a preview posting, there was an error message which was related to salesperson. But they didn't wanted this error message during the preview. They only wanted it during the actual post or during the actual release. So you train your users and they say, okay, I went into latest error and here is my error, which is somewhere on general post line, there was an error message, which is triggered from this process. Now, at this point, while he was trying to preview it, it doesn't give you as a developer a good insight of what code is executing. And the actual developer is not available. So you actually want to understand what's happening. So what we do is we go back to our VS Code and we create a new project. Okay, I'll go. 15.0. I do it my own server and I delete this hello world.al. Okay. And here, the first term that we talked about in our slide deck, which is the attach configuration. So if you have to do snapshot debugging, we always kind of look at this window and don't look here and there, which is pretty obvious. But this button was always available in the past also, but you can actually click here to say add configuration. And there are different uses of this button, but I'll only limit it to the snapshot one. So when I click on add configuration, it gives me certain options. And the third and the fourth option that you're seeing on your screen right now is around initializing a snapshot debugging on cloud or your own server, which means that snapshot debugging is also available on-prem if required. So I click on this and I say on your server, and here the same parameters are there, which is what is the server name? Okay, my server name is this. What is an instance? Default, this, break on next, and then there are different options. Like if you know the user ID, you use the user ID. If you're on SaaS and you know the session ID, then you can also add or only add session ID. It's up to you. Based on where you are working, you can choose either of those parameters. Once you are done with this, once you have attached this, the first thing you should do is download the symbols, because the symbols will be used to fetch your snapshot. So let's do a download symbols. And now system asks you for which of these configuration you want to download symbols for. So I actually want to download symbol for my snapshot. So I click next. It goes to the server and it downloads the required symbols which are available there. If you notice, it didn't download the symbols for my extension, which I have just deployed a while ago. Now our friend, as we said, the shortcut is F7. So let's hit F7 on your screen. And you can see or read here on the bottom of the screen that the snapshot debugging is started, sending request to this server, and the snapshot debugger initialize is done. And check the status using show all snapshot command if you want to do that. Or otherwise, if you notice here at the bottom corner, there is a 1 with the debugger sign. And you guys can see that on the screen, right?
Yes, it's definitely
At the bottom. Yeah. Okay. So when you click on this, you will see a GUID with some details. Status initiated, the tenant is default, and the filter that you have applied is users should be sort of. But it is initialized, it's not started. So we need to make sure that the session gets started before we start repoing our issue. So what I'll do is I'll open a session and make sure that I'm getting, and here you got a message that the snapshot debugging session with this ID has been started. Start the scenario that's failing, and you need to troubleshoot that. So if you click on this now, it'll say started. So it identified the session that you are in, and now it'll start recording all the things that you're doing. So I go back to my sales order and I say, here's my sales order, which have a salesperson JO, and I go here and say preview posted. It'll execute in the same way. Once you are done with that, you can come back to your VS Code and you can say Alt F7. Notice here, right now everything is empty other than the symbols there. So now when I do a Alt F7, it should now show you all the sessions that are being debugged, and then you select a session and it'll stop that. And there is a zip file which will get downloaded automatically. Now this zip file, we'll go into it, we'll see what it is. But at this point, you can actually start testing your debug scenario. For that, as we do in typical debugging, we'll just hit F5 and it will start. What is this happening? Oh no, this should not happen. Let me see it here. Okay, let me just, no, that's done. Debug, publishing. Okay, and now if I do this, and sorry, it should actually run it from here. Am I missing something? It should not launch it. It should actually run this scenario. Oh, sorry, I forgot a step. Okay, so once these files are downloaded, you don't have to publish this extension. Bottom here, I kind of forgot this all the time. The icon will change to a different color. When you click on this and you select a session which is already downloaded and click into it, it will actually execute that code automatically. And it will stop you at the breakpoint, which is by default the place where the error is. At this point, you can see all your local variable, what values that those have, what was the sales order, what are the different fields on that sales order, what was the sales person, and then also it gives you the whole call stack, which is there, which is somebody clicked on preview posting. From there, it went to show preview, 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 preview. Then it came here. And at this point, before this code was called, now at this point, you want to see what was this preview mode and what was its value. But right now, there is no value for this. And the globals and locals are empty. And the reason is, as I said in the beginning, that snapshots are taken based on the debugger points that you place in your code. Because there was no debugger point placed, system automatically identified the error message and break on error kind of thing in nav and stopped at that point. So just to make sure, am I doing something wrong or right, I can actually come back here and say, okay, at this point, and this is similar, Sahid, in normal debugging, you click F9. You stop your session. You have a debugger point here. You don't have to do anything again. You just have to do a start a snapshot again for sure. So when you click on F7, it'll show you two sessions now. One is initialized and not yet kicked off. So let's go back to our client and let's try to re-log in here. Sorry guys, I guess I'm okay. Let's click here. Let's go to sales order quickly. Select that order. Repo that step again. Once it is done, come back here. Do Alt F7. Done. Status stopped. That's stopped. Now there should be two zip files, one for each time when I did this. Select the second one based on the time that you have and run it. At this point, this time it will respect the debug point that you have put in place and will also fetch the values at that particular instance of the time, which is at this point, the preview mode variable is actually true. And if I come back to the next line, the preview mode, okay, I still have to go, like now you can use normal debugger, you can step into or step over, it's all works as normal debugger. So the event that I'm subscribing also have a preview mode boolean. So if the developer would have said that, oh, if it is not preview mode, then and only then execute my code, that would have solved the problem. So I can actually have the preview mode added in my code and say, oh, if it is a preview mode, then don't check anything, go away. So this way, using snapshot debugging, you can download the snapshots of that code which is happening, and you can actually see them. So now let's quickly look into this, because this was interesting what happened when you do a download of those files. It actually downloads the DAL files, which are debuggable files, for all the objects that you trace during that process. These are screenshots which I was not able to open, but at the end, when you come down here at the end, you'll see all the objects that was touched and all those DAL files, just to simulate the debugging, offline debugging capabilities with the snapshot debugging. Are there any catches? I don't think so. There are some limitations for sure. One is not everybody can run it. The user should have this permission, D365 snapshot debug permission group, to have permission to do snapshot debugging. And it can be done by the customer users as a customer developer or an external partner developer if this permission is assigned. So you can control it from permission. It respects the as debugging respect in the same way snapshot debugging also respect the property show my code and non-debuggable in the extension. So if there is an ISV extension where show my code is false, or if there is a code segment where non-debuggable is written, tagged, then the snapshot debugging will not allow you to read that code as it works in the normal debugging. It is available, as I said, on-prem. We have just tested it on Dockers, available on sandbox environment SaaS or production environment SaaS. And the capabilities are available everywhere in the same way as we just saw. There is also one limitation that if you start a snapshot debugging session and did not do anything for 10 minutes, it automatically stops that session, as in that debug snapshot session automatically. So there's a time bit. The other limitation that I was able to read, or not limitation, but kind of things that snapshot debugging will not cover, is if you have crazy loops which are going in in loop by loop, those code segment will not be considered, as in they will kind of kill the snapshot debugging. And I don't know the exact size, but there is a size of the zip file which is max size that snapshot debugging right now support. If it goes beyond that, then snapshot debugging doesn't work at that point. So you should not go crazy and put debugger point at every place where you want it. Take wiser decision where you want that from the first snapshot debugging session and place debugger points where it makes more sense. Any questions? Shahid, did it make sense? And Shahid and Abhinav, I guess.
Yeah, actually, the concept is fine, but when I'm trying to, find out some values in, on-prem 14, the breakpoint is not working actually. I don't know, maybe.
And you're talking about yeah, BC14 AL had some problems with debugger. They were still trying to figure that out. As far as I remember, I had seen some problems in BC14 debugger, but that's how things grow. As in, when new version comes, things kind of get settled in. So yeah, I understand that BC14 had some issues.
I found the same actually, and that's why I'm reconciling with you. Because the message is showing that there is web 2 version maybe is started at this debugging part 1440.
Okay. Yeah, I have seen problems with debugger in BC14, but now it's more stable than BC14 for sure. I forgot to tell you guys one more point, that snapshot debugging also allows you to debug background sessions in the same way as your normal debugger does. So it's not limited only for the user session. It can debug other sessions also. Abhinav, do you have any questions left based on your question?
No, sir. Thanks for that session.
Okay, not a problem, man. Okay, so there's nothing else. Then I guess we are already 7 minutes ahead of our time. So thank you. I'm sorry for the delay.
No
Saurabh,
problem, Saurabh. Just one little question. Can we just have a summary of different topics that would be rolled out during these open
I
discussions ahead of?
I actually don't plan these. So like this week, I was trying to do something,
I
but
knew
then
it.
Avinav pinged me on somewhere and said, I would like to have something on a snapshot debugging. I said, okay, I've done it, used it. So let's talk about it in the next one.
Oh,
So
thanks, you're generous.
maybe we need to figure out a playlist somewhere or playbook somewhere, the topics that we'll cover. But let me think
No, it
about it.
just includes it on the invitation. You see, when you send the
Oh,
invitation, when
okay.
the Power Automate send it, it would be crafted in there.
Okay, let me think about it. Maybe I can plug it in somewhere in my Power Automate.
Okay, good.
Yeah, Vijay.
Saurabh, have you so the last session in which we discussed about the email account? So the code, have you figured out somewhere we can modify the program to set as a from address?
No, right. So the plan was that on the similar line, I was thinking to work on interfaces because I know that that thing can only be achieved by interface. But let me give that some time on interface this week to understand how I can tweak it. Because without using interface, Vijay, I'm very much sure that we cannot do that. But let me see if there is a way.
Okay. Okay. Thanks, Saurabh. Thank you.
Uh, Sorry. To add to that, yeah, I was testing this sending email functionality from one of the interfaces in the product. So what problem I was facing from the front end was the email was going, so it was through the SMTP setup which was there from the Navision version. So I mean we have tested it in Business Central 18. So same thing we upmerged and then we tested, and only attachment was not getting. I mean attachment was not coming in the email, but the email was working.
And this is which version?
BC 18.
That
So
seems
the
odd, but I haven't used the SMTP one. Maybe I'll have to go back on one of the Docker and test it.
yeah, we had this functionality developed in nav version, and then we this
Oh,
upgraded
that's
it
a
to
custom
BC 18.
functionality?
Yeah, yes.
Okay. So that is something that you might have to debug because if it was written on SMTP and on your Business Central 18, are you still using the old SMTP or switch to the new module, email module?
No, we are still using the old one.
Then it should
While
work. Otherwise, I don't know where the wrong code is. You might have to debug it to find it out. Because if it was base, I'm pretty sure Microsoft will be able to help. But if it is a custom functionality, you might have to debug it and find out where that piece is missing. Maybe the
yeah.
function that you are calling had different parameters now. Or maybe the old one that you are using is now obsolete. There are so many situations around it. Okay.
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 Yeah, thank
Anything
you.
else, anyone?
Saurabh, one more question. Or
Go ahead.
we have two type of notification: email notification and second is screen notification. Notes.
For workflows.
Workflow.
Yeah.
So what are the setups required? I mean, if you can suggest a link for the second type of notification.
Also, that's a little bit tricky because it is set up per user wise, which is pretty odd. But I'm pretty sure that administrators should be able to do it. So on your user or user setup page, there is a notification setup somewhere. Maybe on user setup or approval user setup.
Approval user setting.
Right. On your approval user setup, there is a notification setup where you can define if it is an approval, then what by default it's email, but you can say that it is note, and then for note as in there it'll always be instantly. But if you have, let's say for overdue, you want emails, then you can define when you want it, right? So like you can say that I don't want it instantly, I want it clubbed every month, or month is more, so let's say weekly. whatever is approval request, overdue approval request, I want to get it every week at this time on these days or on this particular day. I just like them to see all of them on Friday and then decide which one I want to approve or not. But the problem is that it is user voice. It is not generic for everyone. So somebody will have to come and set this for everybody. I was looking for it, that there is a way that I can do it automatically for everybody. But that's how it is at this point.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Okay, man. Okay. Dashrath, you have something? I see your hand raised.
One more question if you have time.
Help me.
I want to restrict send to button on report request page for custom report. How it
Send
is
to
possible?
button. Where
Yes.
you want to restrict, as in what send? Oh, send to Excel, PDF, and things like that.
Yes.
And this is on-prem or SaaS?
Yes.
This is SaaS. Okay.
Yes.
SaaS. Let me think about it. On-prem, there is a setting. I don't think that you can change settings on service tier on SaaS. As in, I don't think is the wrong word. I'm sure that you cannot change settings on service tier, because on-prem there is a setting on service tier which can restrict sending options, right? But let me see, is there a way that we can, because there are some triggers available, events available to change things on your report request page. So maybe if there is something, I'll let you know.
Yes.
Okay, I have work for next week. Okay,
Oh.
Anything else?
No, thanks.
So thank you for your time. It was really helpful, informative as usual. It was great. Thank you again.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, Arav.
Thank you.
Nice.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks. Bye. Enjoy your week.